Betting, the final frontier. These are the voyages of the Bet with the Best podcast. Its mission is to explore better ways to bet on races, to seek out new, successful players, and to boldly go where no podcast has gone before. I am very pleased to announce that the Bet with the Best podcast has its first sponsor, and it's an ideal sponsor, Amwager, an ADW built by horse players for horse players. Amwager has all sorts of unique features designed to give you an edge when betting. For example, one of my favorite tools is the conditional wagering system that's lightning fast and lets you set the minimum price you will take on a wager and then will fire off the bet at the last possible second, assuming the odds meet your minimum. We always talk about value on the Bet with the Best podcast, and this is a great tool for ensuring that you are betting only when you think you have an edge. It's great for win betting, but Amwager lets you apply it to other pools as well, such as exacta and trifecta wagers. Another tool that I really like is the Dutch wagering tool that lets you weight your bets rather than simply boxing a set of horses. We've discussed on Bet with the Best podcast the strategy of tossing a weak favorite and boxing several other horses in exactas and or trifectas and supers. And this tool lets you do that in a much more efficient way than a simple box. Yet another cool tool that Amwager provides is a fair value exacta grid. On Bet with the Best, we've talked about how sometimes there will be significant discrepancies between the win pool and the exacta pool, particularly at NYRA tracks where the computer teams are in one pool but not the other. This tool will flag such discrepancies and help point you to possible underlays and overlays. We've also talked about with computer model players on Bet with the Best, and Amwager has another great feature for those of you who are using computer models or thinking about doing so. That is the ability to wager by file upload. You can quickly upload a large number of wagers using a simple CSV format. Those are just a few of the many special features that Amwager has to offer, along with live video and race replays, free integrated form to win past performance information, and much more. Amwager is licensed and operated in the US, and best of all, they will actually pay you to play. If you sign up now and deposit and bet $150, then you will earn a $150 lump sum bonus. So there's no reason not to give Amwager a try. If you want to bet with the best, then you need the best tools there are to wager with. You need Amwager.
This guest truly needs no introduction. He's the author of several of the best books ever written about playing the races. Those books include Beyer on Speed, Picking Winners, My $50,000 Year at the Races, and The Winning Horse Player. He was also a racing columnist for the Washington Post for many years, and of course, the creator of the Beyer speed figures used in DRFPPs. I'm extremely pleased and excited to welcome Andy Beyer to the show. Hello, Andy.
Well, Chris, thanks for having me.
This is going to be fun. You know, I usually have the guests start out with what I call their horse player origin story, how they got into the game and how that evolved into them become, in your case, a professional player, eventually an author, and making a whole career out of the racing game. So if you would, could you share your horse player origin story?
You know, from childhood, I liked games of chance. I liked gambling. I liked playing cards. I liked pinball machines. At the age of 12, I pestered my father into taking me to a racetrack, because I just had a hunch that would be something that appealed to me, when I got my first look at the daily racing form and all those numbers, I was a numbers guy as a kid. I said, this could be for me. And when I was in college, I spent probably a little too much time in all-night poker games and going out to Suffolk Downs. But it was actually in 1970. I'd gotten out of the Army. I had a job writing about horse racing for the late Washington Daily News, and so I mean, that was the point where I said I'm really going to devote myself to trying to become a successful horse player, and that's when I started experimenting with speed figures, and that was my launching pad. But I knew I had, you know, I had gambling in my blood, and I, you know, even before I'd been to a racetrack, I had a hunch this could be my thing.
So you did go to college, right? And almost graduated, if I remember reading your book. You didn't quite get it done.
That is correct. I mean, I had some promise as a youth. I got into Harvard, and I got a lot of mileage out of the story of the demise of my Harvard career. I mean, I made it to the spring of my senior year, and then skipped my final exam in Chaucer to go up to New York for the Belmont Stakes. Not a really productive career move, I guess, but it turned out all right.
Yeah, we've had a couple similar stories from other players on the podcast, almost identical, in fact. So I'm glad that you made that decision, because really have enjoyed the books you ended up writing and just following your whole career. You've been a role model for me and others. And that's what I'd like to get into a little bit now, is sort of, through time, at some point you figured out that you could make a living being a professional player, so talk about how you got there and what you learned along the way that you think would be of value for players in terms of, what they need to do beyond just the handicapping and picking winners, but all the other stuff it takes to be successful as a horse player.
Well, I'll tell you first, just my early years of getting serious. The idea of the concept of speed figures was hardly original to me. I mean, back in the 60s, there were plenty of horse racing magazines, or that always had speed charts and kind of tips on using final time to handicap, and so and most of the advice or the figures where it was just most people just had bad ideas. But I said I'm going to try to focus on using time as a handicapping tool. And I was encouraged. I had somewhat of a mentor in this area. My press box colleague in the Washington, Baltimore area, Clem Florio, was a guy who was a very shrewd handicapper, and he always he just looked at results and compared the times of different races to know who'd run fast and who hadn't. And he told me and encouraged me that I was on the right track, trying to develop a real systematic way of looking at times. And it took me about 5 years to do it. There were 3 steps, and I'll just summarize them briefly. Was first to be able to compare times at different distances. If one horse ran at 6 furlongs, another at 7 furlongs, how do you how do you equate them? And that was fairly easy. It was, sort of high school level mathematics, and just you know, a lot of time spent going through racing form charts and you know, looking at times of races. Uh, Part two was, you know, learning how to develop a track variant. And the daily racing form already had a track variant, which is still in the PPs, was crudely done, and I, uh, after a lot of trial and error, uh, my, uh, you know, I uh, realized that whenever I looked at a race and tried to use it as a basis for judging how fast the track was, I looked at uh, horses' previous figures that they'd earned and use that as a as a basis for judging the track. If you had two horses who'd run a figure of 80 and they were in a photo finish, and now the speed chart said they'd run 100. That was an indication the track was very fast, maybe 20 points fast. So I was able to develop good track variants, and was playing the horses with some with some results in Maryland, but my real breakthrough came in 1976, and this is after like 5 years of working on the figures, and I realized, I had a little exposure to the racing in Florida in midwinter, where horses came from all over the country, and were thrown together, and it was for a typical horse player, well, for almost any horse player, it was inscrutable. How did you compare the horse from New York with the horse from Ohio, with the horse from Illinois, the horse from Kentucky? It was mystifying, and I said, if I could make my figures interchangeable from track to track, and have a good set of figures for all these tracks, I could have such an edge. I'd know who was better than whom when everybody else was guessing. And so I spent just a ridiculous amount of time, in front of stacks of racing forms, developing figures for out-of-town tracks. And and then I was at the Washington Star at that point, and the big editor at the paper just came up to me one day and said, "How are you doing? Are you happy here?" And I said, "Well, I just think I want to change my life a little bit." And he thought I was about to ask for money, or more money, and I said, "No, what I would really like to do is go to Florida for 3 months during the winter and write my column from there." He said, "Okay, we can do that." And so I was, in 1976, I started going to Miami. Became an annual thing, and I got down there, and with the figures for all of these tracks, I had an edge like very few gamblers will ever have in their lives. I mean, I just knew who was better than whom, and that was my breakthrough.
So did you then really bet aggressively and seize the day when you had that edge? This has come up before.
I bet with both fists. when I look back, at my records at that time, and because I'm a pretty diligent intelligent record keeper. I even today I say I was, I was betting that much. I'm sort of astounded, but I knew I had an edge, and and it was going to pay off, and and I bet accordingly.
So how long did that last where you had that big edge? There were very few other people that were doing figures at multiple tracks, down in Florida when the horses were shipping in. How long did that last? How long was that heyday?
From the mid 70s to the late 90s. So I had a hell of a run where the Daily Racing Form signed us up in 1992, and the figures now were in the form, but it took a while for for the betting public and for the industry to really embrace them. I was still, I could, still get big prices on top figure horses, but when you know when there were no figures being published, I mean there would be races where a horse with a standout number could be 15 or 20 to 1, and I mean that today, as you know, that would never happen. But the figures just gave me a tremendous edge, and I plus had had other fairly strong elements of my handicapping game. I put a lot of emphasis on track biases and paid a lot of attention to trainer patterns. But just combining those factors, with the figures, it was I thought I had a pretty formidable arsenal. And I guess when times are when times are good in your life, whatever you're doing, you never think too much about, well, what happens when all this comes to an end. But by the end of the 70s, as the figures, I'm sorry, by the end of the 90s, when the figures had really become, established in the industry, the edge was gone. But I had a great run during those nearly 25 years.
Yeah, and that's a question I have for you. Was it a difficult decision, or to, given all your success and how it relied so much on having these figures that most others didn't, putting those out in the DRF, in the public domain, basically kind of giving away your edge? Was that a tough decision to make, or?
It was not, because I felt that if I didn't do it, somebody else would. Remember, I'd written the book outlining my methodology, so it wouldn't take too much for somebody to borrow that knowledge and make speed figures and publish them. So that was a no-brainer decision, and plus, my partner and I and our employees were being paid for the figures, and and it was relatively risk-free compared to gambling, so it worked out nicely.
So even though money won is twice as sweet as money earned, it's still not bad to have some of that money earned, the low risk side.
Right. I loved to gamble, and I really relished the daily adventure at the racetrack, and the risk taking, and and I know I had a pretty I had a pretty good temperament, for gambling. So I had, I love doing it, and I, when obviously we all have bad streaks, and when I had, horrible days, I learned that, one of the, one of the most
Oh,
important lessons a gambler can learn is just, you know, just don't let it carry over. Don't let a loss throw off your equilibrium. I mean, if I had a tough beat of one sort or another, I might be extremely mad or upset. For the balance of the racing day. I mean, there was one day at Gulfstream, I made a big bet on a horse who won and was the victim of a really idiotic disqualification, and and this was an uncharacteristic thing for me to do, but I smashed my fist through the wall of the Gulfstream Park press box. Somebody put a frame around it with with a sign that said "Buyer's Hole," but the next day it was out of my mind, and then that's one of the real keys to gambling on anything. You can't you have to accept the fact that there are going to be excruciatingly tough beats in your life, and you can't let them undermine you. You just, after 24 hours, put them out of your mind.
well, yeah, that makes perfect sense. You can't go on. You said you were a poker player. You don't want to go on tilt's the term they use there.
Right.
You got to avoid going on tilt, even in any form of gambling. So you mentioned that's a really important part of being successful. What are some other things that you learned, beyond just handicapping, especially on the betting side of the game, or the mental side, or the preparation, managing money, that sort of thing, that is worth sharing?
Well, the in terms of money management, I think you really have to, you have to be kind of honest with yourself, and take a clear-eyed view of when when it's time, you know when it's time to step in and make a big bet. Uh, when you're in a situation that is advantageous for you, or when you didn't have that kind of edge. As I told you, when I started going to Florida in 1976, I mean, every year, I would. Uh, I would go to the track with just uh, with, with just great confidence that that I was going to succeed, and I would be betting accordingly. But I've been in plenty of situations over the years where I had to recognize that I just I didn't have the edge. I didn't have a handle on whatever I was playing. I mean, more recently, I mean, in the last 2 or 3 winters ago, I mean, I thought that Oaklawn Park would really be right up my alley. It's all, my handicapping has always been oriented toward dirt rather than turf. They've all dirt. They have a good trainer colony. Occasional track biases you can play off. I could never win there, and I don't know what it was, but I just had to accept reality. That I just had to back off from from playing Oaklawn because for whatever reason, I didn't get it, and you have to be honest with yourself at times.
So did you even even when you're at the height of your success, did you really like focus for those winners in Florida? I mean, were did you focus on certain kinds of bets, certain types of races, or was it just, you were using your numbers anywhere you went, they gave you a big enough edge you played? I mean, I'm just curious
Well,
how you targeted.
remember, I mean, when I when I kind of started out, I mean, like there, having an exacta on a race constituted an exotic bet. When I made one of the, the the biggest single race non-exotic scores of my life. It was the 1984 Belmont, the exact of Swale and Pine Circle. They didn't even. There was no. I could have crushed the trifecta for untold amounts of money, except they had no trifectas at the time. So, a lot of my life was spent in a really tame era for betting. You know, you know, for forms of betting. But when the pick six and its cousin, the double triple, came into being in the 90s, that was my meat and potatoes. I mean, I loved pick sixes, and the double triple, which was popularized in Maryland, was great for me because there was no off track betting. You had to be at Laurel or Pimlico to play it, and I, of course, was there every day, and so you weren't getting you weren't getting wise guys on their computers in in that era, betting from all over the country. So the I mean the I mean whenever I had a situation where there was a big carryover or any kind of a carryover in the pick six at a track I was following, I would try to hone in on it. I mean, I loved that bet.
So talk a little bit about that, because all of a sudden, it's not just, if you have a winner in a race, but when you're trying to hit a pick six, you have to really think about bet construction and, strategy on the betting side. For that bet or any of the other exotic bets as they came along, how did that change the way you approach things?
Well, I would, first you look at the composition of the races and decide, whether you've got enough good opinions to wade in, and just in the broadest terms, when you're playing multiple combinations, if you've got a strong opinion in one leg of a pick six, and you can say, I'm going to really be heavily weighted here, and then I'll spread out and in the tougher races, or that where my opinions are kind of marginal, so that I didn't have a real formula for it, but I wanted to anchor a pick six play with one or two races where I really felt strong and I would be spreading otherwise, and then I'd kind of go in reverse and give play some tickets, just giving me a little backup on those, if in case those strong opinions went astray, and maybe I could salvage myself with one of my lesser uh, horses in the sequence. But the person who was really good about and very methodical about this was Steve Christ, my old professional colleague and Pick Six rival over the years in Florida. That he wrote a book on 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 betting strategy and so on for Pick Sixes. It was very good. I mean, much more scientific than I was ever capable of.
But it sounds like you would, first of all, see, you didn't even attempt it typically unless you had a couple of races where you had a strong opinion. And then, like you said, you would wade in after that, maybe spread in the other legs, lean on those main opinions, and then maybe play a backup.
Right. I mean,
well.
I would, I mean, there are obviously plenty of days when you look at the components of a Pick Six, and you say, geez, this is just too tough for me. If let's say if there were $1 million carryover, I'd grit my teeth and take some kind of a shot anyway. I think I was able to. Again, the figures were explicit enough. I mean that I kind of, I knew the situations where, where I was going to be strong, and if all 6 races were just a mishmash, then I'll say I'll wait for another day.
But you really targeted carryovers back then. That was
absolutely, and to me the development in racing that has been most disheartening to me, that is really, I would say, just really spoiled a lot of the game for me, was the birth of the Rainbow Six and all of its imitators with jackpot bets that were the most fan unfriendly innovations that have ever come down the pike. I mean, whenever anyone today asks me about Pick Sixes and so on, I mean, the Rainbow Six or the jackpot wagers, I'd say my best advice is never play them. I mean, it is the worst. From the better standpoint, it's just the worst vehicle that's ever come down the pike. And if it was tough enough when it was conceived, the invasion of the sport by the big computer syndicates really turned those bets from being difficult into being impossible. We're all, I guess we're all today, very aware of the existence of these mysterious computer groups who bet huge amounts of money and make the odds board go haywire. But what is bad about them is that that with the provision that you have to be the only holder of a perfect ticket, to collect the jackpot, there's kind of no way that an ordinary player or even a mid-level player is going to come up with a ticket that these groups, who are betting thousands or tens of thousands of dollars, they're going to hit it, and you won't. I mean, you can't. You can't walk between the raindrops and beat them, and so it's a bad bet, and I had sort of always thought, well, at least on the mandatory payout days, the average guy would have a shot, and I talked recently to my friend Pat Cummings, who of the Thoroughbred Ideas Foundation, who has done a lot of study of the mathematics of betting with the computer syndicates being a big presence, and he found that the public does worse on the mandatory payout days. I mean that at Gulfstream over a period of a few years, that if normally the public would lose 18, 20, 22%, because of the takeout, their losses on their losses on a day would be more than 30%, sometimes as much as 50%, on mandatory payout days. So, I mean, you can't beat them, and by taking the by taking the pick six out of play, for at least for me or for any rational gambler, it just really kind of spoiled the game, in my opinion.
Yeah, that's an opinion that many of the players that have been playing for a while that we've had on this show said exactly what you said. It used to be a great bet with the higher minimums and the real carryovers, especially back when you had to be on track, like you said, to make the plays. But with the lower minimums and the jackpot bets, it pretty much is, like you said, spoiled it. But so besides not playing the jackpot pick six or any jackpot wager for that matter, what are some of the other things that players are maybe many players do that if they would stop doing or do differently would really improve their game, based on everything you've learned through the years?
Well, you've got to be a diligent handicapper. I mean, I have in both good times and bad, I've always felt that paying attention to the way races are run and looking for track biases that are really strong enough to dictate the outcome of races is one of the great tools in any handicapper's arsenal. I mean, if you spot a day when every race is being run on the rail, I mean, it opens up going forward, even if you're not at the track that day. I mean, it opens up going forward all kinds of potential betting opportunities, throwing out horses who've got great looking form because they were with the bias, and upgrading horses who were against it. And I've always been, a strong believer in understanding trainers and analyzing their methodology. Looking for people who've got particular strengths or particular weaknesses and cashing in on that. I mean, I think any player could learn a lot about that aspect of the game by listening to Andy Serling's daily analyses on talking horses before the New York cards, because he really understands how to use the DRF formulator software to study trainers, to burrow into their records and how they perform under the circumstances they're in today. So those have always been the kind of pretty much unchanging keys in my handicapping. But if the smart, if the computer guys are in there just dominating the pools, it's really hard. It's really hard to get an edge over them.
What about on the betting aspect? What are some mistakes, or what did you learn on the betting side that helped you be more successful beyond just the handicapping part, and what could players benefit from if in terms of
I was always looking for the big score. I never believed in trying to grind out a few $100s a day. I wanted to hit the home run ball, and and obviously that was something that was a kind of a realistic goal when the traditional pick sixes existed. I still believe in trying to look for the big score rather than taking a conservative grinded out approach. But I'll tell you, nowadays I'm pretty conservative doing everything.
Yeah, I was going to ask, what about like the vertical exotics when they came out, with trifectas and superfectas, and your penchant for trying to make a big score? Did you ever try to attack those pools real aggressively, or was it more horizontal pick six?
That it just depends. You look at races or the combination of races, and one day you may have an opinion. That an exacta or a trifecta play is looks very solid, and other times you'll look for you might see like a pick 5 configuration that you think offers offers some good promise, but you can't be locked. You can't be locked into a particular kind of betting style. You've got to. I think you have to let the races themselves and your analysis of them kind of dictate how you're going to play on a given day.
So try to take advantage of the different pools based on your opinion.
Right.
So on your, do you look more for, say, a favorite you want to play against, or some horse that you particularly like that you want to play, or both? I mean,
it could be either. Again, you know, you, uh, I'll analyze the race. You know, uh, look at the videos, look at the trainer data, and will sometimes if you keep an open mind, but you may see a short price favorite, and you say, "Gee, I hate this horse," and other times, maybe there's somebody, even a moderate price play that looks unbeatable to you, and you can structure play accordingly. I mean, I don't think I don't think you want to get locked into one style, like saying I'm going to look for vulnerable favorites. I mean, obviously we all like to find them, but let them come to you.
So let's say you did find one, a vulnerable favorite. It's going to be a short price. You don't like that horse. What would be the way you would probably try to attack that? Would you go? I mean, like, is there a certain way you would typically go after a bad favorite?
Well, I think that in the in the current era, with the popularity of pick fives, that the pick five wager, forces players, to to try to find one or two singles in the sequence, and they're gonna zero in more often than not, on favorites or on short priced favorites. So I think that if you have an even money shot that you don't like, that becomes a good foundation for constructing a pick five play, where, say, if I can knock off this favorite, it's going to make it's going to create value everywhere else.
So that makes a lot of sense. What about the other example where you had a pretty good price on a horse you think, offers good value? What would be the typical way you would go after that?
Well, you don't want, if you like a 10 to 1 shot, you you don't want to be overly invested, in a pick five where you've got four four other races that can undermine that that play. I mean, if I have a horse at a solid price, that's when I'll more likely use just a single race play, an exact or a try, because you don't want to let a good opinion on a good priced horse get wasted in in too big a sequential bet.
Yeah, that's a great example of where you want to let your opinion dictate your play, that you don't want to miss out. If all you play is a pick five and you have a great opinion on a 10 to 1 shot and he wins and you don't cash the pick five, I mean, that's just doesn't seem like an optimal way to take advantage of your opinion.
Correct.
So that's a really good point. So, well, we're wrapping up on time. So I got a couple last questions. One's about, the books you've written. I'm a big fan of your books. You haven't written one in a long time. Is there any chance we're ever going to see another book from Andy Beyer?
I don't think so. I wrote, Beyer on Speed when the figures went into the racing form, because I just wanted to give, to, you know, for to explain what they were all about to an audience that was seeing them for the first time. But uh, uh, I don't have, I think I've cut, I've covered all the, I've covered all the ground, enough times that, uh, that I think I've shot my wad.
Well, it's disappointing because you're a really good writer. I mean, what was your favorite book that you wrote of the ones that you
Well,
wrote?
of course, I had, uh, you know, a, a lot. I mean, picking winners like changed my life, and I had no idea that, nor did my publisher, that it was going to, uh, it was going to sell any copies except to maybe a handful of hardcore players, and it's now been in print for nearly 50 years. It's been translated into Japanese and Korean. I, it gave me a lot of satisfaction, and you kind of, recognition in the industry that kind of led to the figures being in the racing form. So that book changed my life.
Well, the first chapter of that book's my favorite thing you've written. It just really captures what it's like to be a horse player, what motivates players. To me, that really resonated, and things you talk about in there about how good players, share ideas and improve their play. And, it's a lot more than just picking winners to be successful. You have to be good at the betting side and the mental side. All those things are the things we try to talk about on this podcast. So, that was probably my favorite book that you wrote, but they were all good. And the game really has changed quite a bit over those 50 years. So one question I like to ask before at the end is, if you could wave a magic wand and do something to improve racing, what would you do? Because certainly there's all kinds of issues right now with the game.
Well, I would start by getting rid of jackpot bets. I mean, there are a lot of things that we can't change, but if America's racetracks were smart enough to realize that they're screwing all of their bedrock customers, with these wagers. I mean, it could be easily done, and I salute the New York Racing Association for, uh, you know, re, for eliminating that bet, and and getting rid of the computer groups, and in their like pick five bets. I mean, uh, they really had the interests of their customers in mind, and it's a shame that just about all the other tracks in America, can't see that. So that would be my number one hope for the industry.
All right. Well, that can probably wrap things up. I really appreciate you taking the time, Andy. And like I said, I've always been a fan. Your books, even though they're 50 years old, obviously some things are going to be dated, but they're still definitely resonate with horse players. I think anybody that reads it, some of the younger listeners, maybe have never read a book. Just kidding. But I'd encourage them all to pick up those books and read them, and really appreciate you spending the time.
Okay, well, thanks for the kind words, Chris, and I'm sure we'll be talking again sometime in the future.
Great. Well, thank you. And thank all the listeners out there, and may you boldly go where no horse player has gone before.
Okay.